His scream cut through the silence of the night. "I'll take it off, I can't stand it." The cleaner, who barely dared to lift her eyes, had carried a well-known name. That night, love emerged amid fear, guilt, and a devastating truth. If you enjoy love and romance stories, watch until the end, subscribe to this channel, and leave a comment saying where you're listening. The rain beat against the mansion windows with an almost human insistence, as if begging to enter. Michael Worthington watched the drops trickle down the glass, each following its own tortuous path until disappearing on the sill. This was how he viewed life, solitary trajectories that inevitably led to emptiness. From the second-floor office, he could see the entire expanse of his property. The house stood on a cliff in Aspen, Colorado, isolated from the world by miles of dense forest and by his own will to remain untouchable. It was a modern construction, all straight lines and glass, where every room breathed the same calculated coldness he cultivated within himself. Not a plant out of place, not an object without a specific function. Everything controlled, everything predictable. At 44, Michael had transformed control into an art form. Owner of one of the country's largest networks of psychiatric clinics, he treated the human mind as one repairs broken machines. Efficient, precise, distant. His patients respected him for the success of his treatments, but few could sustain his gaze for more than a few seconds. There was something in those brown eyes that cut like a blade, something that suggested dangerous depths. On that Monday morning, like every other, he followed his meticulously planned routine. Waking at 5:30, an hour of exercise, a cold shower, black coffee without sugar, reviewing clinic reports until 7, when his driver would arrive to take him to the central office in New York City. But this time something had changed. The domestic staffing agency had called the previous Friday. The employee who looked after the house had resigned without notice. Personal reasons was all they could say. Michael didn't care about the details. He needed someone discreet, efficient, and most importantly, invisible. He couldn't stand the constant presence of strangers in his space, but the house was too large for him to manage alone. "We have a perfect candidate," the agency woman had said. "Young, hard-working, very reserved. She won't cause any problems." Michael had authorized the hiring without even seeing a photo. As long as the person did their job silently and didn't interfere with his routine, it didn't matter who it was. It was exactly 8 o'clock in the morning when she arrived. Michael was in his office when he heard the car engine climbing the gravel drive. Through the window, he saw a white sedan pull up in front of the house. The passenger door opened, and a small figure emerged carrying a faded fabric suitcase. Even from a distance, he could perceive the way she hesitated before closing the door, as if she were gathering courage for each step. The agency woman got out from the driver's side, gesticulating as she spoke. Michael couldn't hear the words, but he saw the new employee nodding without lifting her head. When she finally looked up towards the house, Michael felt something strange in his chest, an almost imperceptible pause in his breathing. She was young, he could see that even from a distance, too thin, in clothes that seemed to have been borrowed from someone larger, brown hair tied back in a simple ponytail without any ornament. But there was something in the way she moved, an almost ethereal delicacy, as if she were always about to disappear. Michael moved away from the window. It wasn't his custom to observe employees. He had more important things to do. 20 minutes later, the agency woman had left and the house returned to silence. Michael went downstairs to the ground floor to retrieve some documents he had forgotten on the living room table when he saw her up close for the first time. She was in the kitchen, her back to him, organizing cleaning products she had taken from her suitcase. She wore light jeans and a navy long-sleeved blouse, both too large for her small frame. When she turned and saw him standing in the doorway, her startle was almost imperceptible, but Michael noticed. She immediately lowered her eyes, like a small animal that had just perceived the presence of a predator. "Mr. Worthington," she said, her voice so low that he had to strain to hear. "I'm Luna, the new employee." Michael studied her in silence for a few seconds that seemed to stretch into an eternity. She couldn't have been more than 25, but there was something in her eyes that suggested she had lived much more. Brown eyes like his, but where his were hard, hers were soft, almost vulnerable. Her fair skin had a pale tone that suggested little sun, little fresh air, little life. "The rules are simple," he said without preamble. "Don't touch my personal belongings. Don't enter the office without authorization. Don't make unnecessary noise. Keep to your schedule. If you need to speak with me, announce yourself before entering any room." She nodded quickly, still without raising her eyes. "Yes, sir." "Your room is at the end of the ground floor hallway. It has an independent entrance from the side of the house. The keys are on the entrance table." He paused, noticing how she held her own hands, fingers tightly intertwined. "Any questions?" "No, sir." Michael nodded and left the kitchen. As he walked towards the garage, he couldn't help but notice that she had organized the cleaning products in alphabetical order, all with their labels facing forward, aligned with military precision. It was the kind of organization he himself would do. In the following days, Michael discovered that Luna was like a benevolent ghost in the house. He would leave in the morning, and when he returned at night, everything was impeccable. Clothes washed and ironed, hung in the closet by color and type, dishes gleaming in the cupboards, polished floors reflecting the light like mirrors. But it was more than that. There was an attention to detail that went beyond professional. She had reorganized the library by subject and chronological order. All his psychiatry books were now together, followed by administration, then literature. She had discovered where he kept his vinyl records and had cleaned them one by one, reorganizing them alphabetically. Even his pens were grouped by color in his desk drawer. It was as if she could read the order he wanted imposed on his life and materialized it without him having to ask. But what intrigued him most was her silence. In 3 weeks of cohabitation, they had exchanged no more than 20 sentences. She appeared when he wasn't there, worked like an efficient shadow, and disappeared to her room when he arrived. She didn't turn on the radio, didn't talk on the phone, didn't receive visitors. It was as if she existed only to care for the house and then dissolve into thin air. Michael began to notice small things. The way she folded the cloth napkins into perfect triangles. How she arranged the fruits in the fruit bowl by size and color, creating an almost artistic composition. How she always left a clean cup next to the coffee machine, as if she knew he sometimes wanted a second dose when he came home from work. It was unsettling to realize that someone was paying so much attention to his habits without him having noticed. One Thursday evening, he arrived home earlier than usual. He had cancelled a meeting and decided to work from home. When he entered through the front door, he heard a sound he couldn't immediately identify. It was coming from the living room. Michael walked silently to the living room entrance and stopped. Luna was there, kneeling on the floor, polishing a glass coffee table with slow, precise circular movements. But that wasn't what had caught his attention. She was humming. It was a low, almost whispered melody that he didn't recognize. There were no lyrics, just a sequence of soft notes that seemed to float in the air. It was the first time he had heard her make any sound other than her monosyllabic replies. He stood there watching, for longer than he should have. There was something hypnotic about the scene. The way she moved with an unconscious grace. How she treated each object as if it were valuable, worthy of care. How her voice, finally freed from fear, revealed an unexpected beauty. It was when she stood up to reach the farthest side of the table that it happened. The sleeve of her blouse caught on the edge of a crystal vase that Michael hadn't even noticed was out of alignment. The vase wobbled, tilted, and fell before either of them could react. The sound of crystal shattering on the marble floor echoed through the house like a gunshot. Luna froze for a second, still standing, looking at the shards scattered at her feet. Then, as if she had woken from a trance, she dropped to her knees and began to gather the fragments with her bare hands. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice choked. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. I'll pay for the vase. I promise I'll replace it. I'm sorry." Michael took a step towards her, but stopped when he saw the blood. One of her hands was cut, a red stream trickling between her fingers as she continued trying to gather the shards, as if she could undo what had happened. "Stop," he said. But she didn't hear. She kept murmuring apologies, collecting the fragments with trembling hands. "Stop," he repeated, louder this time, but she seemed lost in her own panic. It was then that Michael moved. In 3 strides he was beside her. He knelt down and, without thinking, held her hands to stop her from hurting herself further. The contact was electric. She lifted her eyes for the first time since he had arrived home, and Michael felt as if he had been punched in the stomach. It wasn't just tears he saw there. It was pure terror. Not fear of the injury or of having broken the vase. It was fear of him, as if she expected him to explode, to yell, to do something terrible. And it was at that moment, with her hands in his, feeling the warm blood trickle between his fingers, that Michael realized there was much more to Luna than a simple, shy employee. There was a story there, a story of pain. "It's nothing," he said, surprised by the softness of his own voice. "It's just a vase." She blinked as if unable to process his words. "But I broke it, and I can buy another one." Michael released one of her hands and delicately moved away the shards that still remained in her palm. The cut wasn't deep, but it was bleeding quite a bit. "Come, let's take care of this." He helped her up and led her to the kitchen. Luna followed him in silence, still in shock. Michael opened the cabinet where he kept a first aid kit and indicated one of the chairs at the table. "Sit," he said. She obeyed, extending her injured hand when he asked. Michael carefully cleaned the cut, applied antiseptic and put on a simple bandage. His movements were precise, clinical, but there was a delicacy there he hadn't known he possessed. Throughout the process they didn't speak, but Michael was intensely aware of every detail. The way she held her breath when the antiseptic stung. How her fingers were long and delicate, with short, clean-cut nails. How the skin of her hand was soft, despite the calluses that evidenced years of hard work. When he finished, he didn't immediately release her hand. They remained there, he standing beside the chair, she seated, connected by that simple touch. It was Luna who broke the moment, gently pulling her hand away. "Thank you," she murmured. Michael nodded and put away the bandage supplies. When he turned, she was already standing, ready to return to work. "Leave the shards," he said. "I'll clean them later. But it's my job, not with an injured hand." The firmness in his voice allowed no argument. "Go rest. Tomorrow you can do what's necessary." Luna hesitated as if she wanted to argue, but then nodded and left the kitchen. Michael heard her walk down the hallway towards her room, and then the sound of the door closing. He stayed in the kitchen for several minutes, looking at the table where she had been sitting. There were tiny drops of blood on the wooden surface, and he carefully wiped them away with a damp cloth. That night, Michael couldn't concentrate on work. He stayed in his office trying to review reports, but his mind kept returning to that moment in the living room, to the fear in her eyes, to the way she had expected the worst from him, as if she were accustomed to being punished for small accidents. Who had done that to her? Who had taught a young woman in her early 20s to be so afraid of a simple mistake? And why did he care? Michael had never cared about the feelings or stories of his employees. They did their job, received their salary, and stayed out of his personal life. That's how it worked. That's how it had always worked. But something had changed that night. Something had broken when he touched her hand and saw that fear in her eyes. As if a tiny fissure had opened in the wall of ice he had built around himself. And Michael knew with a certainty that disturbed him that that fissure was just the beginning. The next morning he woke up earlier than usual. He hadn't slept well, and by 5 in the morning he was already up making coffee in the kitchen. That's when he heard light footsteps in the hallway. Luna appeared at the kitchen door, already dressed for work, her hand bandaged. "Good morning, Mr. Worthington," she said, avoiding his eyes as always. "How's your hand?" he asked. "Better. Thank you for the bandage." Michael nodded and continued stirring his coffee. There was something different in the air between them, a tension that hadn't existed before. It wasn't uncomfortable exactly, but it was palpable. "I'll clean the shards before I start my other tasks," she said. "I already cleaned them," Michael replied. "Last night?" Luna looked up, surprised. "I didn't have to—" "I know." He poured coffee into his cup and, on an impulse he couldn't explain, prepared a second one. "Want some coffee?" The question seemed to shock her more than anything that had happened the previous night. She stood still in the doorway, looking at him as if she couldn't process the invitation. I don't usually drink coffee," she finally said. "Why?" "It's bad for sleeping." Michael studied her for a moment. There was something in the way she said it, as if she were repeating words she had heard from someone else. "It's morning," he observed. "It won't affect your sleep." Luna hesitated, then took a cautious step towards the table. Michael placed the cup in front of her and sat on the other side. It was the first time they had deliberately shared the same space, the first time he had invited her for anything other than work. She held the cup with both hands, as if warming herself, and took a small sip. Michael noticed that she made an almost imperceptible grimace. "Too strong?" he asked. "A little," she admitted. "But it's good." They drank in silence for a few minutes. Michael observed her discreetly, noticing things he hadn't perceived before. The way she always kept her shoulders slightly hunched, as if trying to occupy less space. How her eyes never rested anywhere for long, always moving, always alert. How she held the cup with such care that she seemed to fear breaking it too. "How long have you worked in cleaning?" he asked, surprised by his own curiosity. "Since 16, she replied after a pause. "Always in private homes?" "No, I started in offices, then hotels. Homes are more recent." Michael did the calculations mentally. If she was 23, as the agency had said, that was 7 years of work. She had started very young. "Does your family live here in New York City?" The question seemed to hit her like a physical blow. She stiffened, lowered her cup, and for the first time since they had started talking, looked directly at him. "I don't have a family," she said, her voice firm but laden with pain. Michael recognized the tone. It was the same one he used when someone asked about his mother, the same defensive barrier, the same refusal to elaborate. He knew he should change the subject, respect the boundaries she had set, but something in him couldn't let it go. "Everyone has family," he said softly. "Not everyone," Luna replied, getting up from the table. "Excuse me, Mr. Worthington, I need to start work." She left the kitchen before he could respond, leaving him alone with 2 half-empty cups and more questions than answers. But Michael had seen something in that last look she gave him. Beyond the pain, beyond the defense, there was recognition, as if, for a moment, she had seen something familiar in him, something that mirrored his own loneliness. And in that moment he knew that the fissure in his wall of ice had become a crack. Hand cracks, he knew all too well, had a habit of growing. In the days that followed the shared coffee, Michael realized that something fundamental had changed in his routine. It wasn't just Luna's small gestures, the way she now left 2 clean cups next to the coffee machine, or how she had organized a small first aid station in the kitchen cabinet with Band-Aids and antiseptic. It was he himself who was different. He started coming home earlier, inventing excuses to cancel meetings or delegate responsibilities. He told himself it was just to check if everything was running smoothly in the house, but the truth was more unsettling. He was curious about Luna in a way he couldn't explain. For 2 weeks they developed a subtle dance. Michael would walk through the living room when she was cleaning, pretending to look for something, just to watch her work. Luna, in turn, began doing her chores in the main rooms when she knew he was home, as if she also wanted to maintain this silent proximity. They didn't converse beyond basic greetings, but there was a mutual awareness in the air, an electric tension that made every casual encounter seem laden with meaning. Michael noticed everything. How she bit her lower lip when she was concentrating, how she always arranged the sofa cushions at perfect angles, how she hummed softly when she thought no one was listening. It was on a Thursday afternoon that the invisible barrier between them truly began to crumble. Michael was in his office when he heard a loud crash from downstairs, followed by absolute silence. He hurried down the stairs and found Luna in the library, standing in front of a tall bookshelf, surrounded by books scattered on the floor. "What happened?" he asked. She turned, her face flushed with embarrassment. The ladder slipped. "I was trying to clean the higher shelves and—" She gestured vaguely at the mess around them. Michael looked at the wooden ladder lying on its side, and then at her. "Are you hurt?" No. I managed to jump before it fell." Luna was already bending down to pick up the books. "I'll clean everything up, sorry for the mess." Michael watched her for a moment, then joined her on the floor, picking up some of the scattered volumes. It was an eclectic mix: psychiatry treatises, classic novels, biographies, business books. When he picked up a copy of The Picture of Dorian Gray, he noticed Luna had stopped moving. "Do you know this book?" he asked, holding up the volume. She hesitated, then nodded slowly. "I read it once, back when I was younger." "And what did you think?" Luna looked at him with surprise, as if she couldn't believe he was interested in her opinion on literature. "It's unsettling," she finally said. "The idea that someone can maintain a perfect appearance while their soul rots inside." The answer surprised him. It wasn't the kind of superficial analysis he would expect from someone without formal education. There was depth there, an intuitive understanding that went beyond the obvious. "Do you read much?" he asked. "I used to read," she corrected, returning to gather the books. "Now I don't have much time." Michael continued helping her, but his mind was processing this new information. Luna was not what she appeared to be on the surface. There were layers to her, a hidden intelligence she kept carefully concealed. When they finished reorganizing the books on the shelf, Michael made an impulsive decision. "You can take any you like," he said. "To your room." "I won't miss them." Luna stared at him, shocked. "Seriously?" "Seriously." She scanned the shelf with her eyes like a child in a candy store, then hesitantly pulled out a volume of short stories by Clarice Lispector. "This one," she said softly. "If you don't mind." Michael nodded, watching how she held the book against her chest as if it were a treasure. It was a gesture so pure, so full of genuine gratitude, that he felt something tightening in his chest. That night, he stayed up late in his office, but couldn't concentrate on work. His mind constantly returned to the conversation in the library, to the way Luna's eyes had lit up when he offered the books. There was a hunger there, a thirst for beauty and knowledge that someone had tried to stifle. The next morning, Michael found a cup of coffee waiting for him in the kitchen, prepared exactly as he liked it. Beside it, there was a small note written in delicate handwriting. "Thank you for the books, Elle." It was the first time she had initiated any communication beyond the strictly necessary, and Michael kept the note in his desk drawer without understanding exactly why. The following days brought a series of small discoveries. Michael began leaving other books in a discreet pile on the library table: poetry, contemporary fiction, some classics he thought she might enjoy. They always disappeared, and there was always a small thank you note waiting for him. One Saturday morning, Michael decided to work from home instead of going to the office. He was reviewing some contracts when he heard music coming from downstairs. It wasn't the low humming he had heard before, but real music. He went downstairs silently and followed the sound to the living room. Luna had turned on the stereo and was cleaning to the rhythm of a soft bossa nova. She moved with a natural grace, as if she were dancing instead of working, completely lost in the music. Michael watched from the doorway, fascinated. It was like seeing a completely different version of her, relaxed, free, almost happy. When the music changed to "The Girl from Ipanema," she even smiled, a small but genuine smile that completely transformed her face. It was then that she turned and saw him standing there. The smile vanished instantly, replaced by the cautious expression she always wore in his presence. She rushed to turn off the stereo, her hands trembling slightly. "I'm sorry," she said quickly. "I didn't know you were home. I won't play music anymore, I promise." "Why not?" Michael asked, taking a step into the room. Because it might bother you. It might interfere with your work." "What if I tell you it doesn't bother me?" Luna looked at him with suspicion, as if suspecting a trick. "Seriously?" "Seriously." Michael walked to the stereo and turned it back on. The music filled the room again. "Actually, it improves the atmosphere." They stood there for a moment, the music playing between them like a bridge. Michael could see the conflict on Luna's face, the desire to believe him fighting against years of conditioning that had taught her not to trust gestures of kindness. "Do you dance?" he asked, surprising himself with the question. "A little," she admitted. "My mother taught me when I was little." It was the first time she had mentioned her mother voluntarily, and Michael felt as if he had received a rare gift. Did she like music? Luna's face softened. She loved it. She always said that life without music was like food without salt, technically nutritious but without any joy. She sounds like she was a wise woman. She was. Luna's voice became almost inaudible. She was the kindest person I ever knew. Michael wanted to ask more, but he saw the exact moment Luna's defenses rose again. She moved away from the stereo and picked up the cleaning products. "I need to finish the living room," she said, returning to her formal tone. Michael nodded and went back up to his office, but left the door open to continue listening to the music. It was better this way, the two of them in the same space, but separated enough so she wouldn't feel pressured. It was that afternoon that everything changed. Michael had gone down to get water in the kitchen when he saw Luna in his office. She had her back to the door, looking at the photographs on the wall. A collection of Worthington family photos through the generations. But it wasn't just any photo that had captured her attention. It was a framed portrait of his mother, taken a few years before her death. She was beautiful, Luna said without turning, as if she knew he was there. Michael entered the office slowly. She was. How did she die? The question caught him off guard. No one ever asked directly about his mother's death. People whispered about the accident or spoke vaguely about health issues, but no one dared to ask the direct question. She took an overdose of medication, he said, his voice hoarser than he expected. Officially it was an accident, but you know it wasn't, Luna completed, still looking at the photo. Michael studied her, disturbed by the ease with which she had arrived at the truth. How do you know? Luna finally turned to face him. There was something different in her eyes, an intensity he had never seen before. Because I recognize the look, she said simply. It's the same one my mother had in her last months, as if she was saying goodbye to everything little by little. A heavy silence settled between them. Michael felt as if she had just exposed a wound he had carefully hidden for decades. Your mother also. She killed herself, yes. Luna said the words bluntly, as if she had made peace with them long ago, but not with medication. She jumped from a bridge. Michael felt as if he had been punched in the stomach. The casualness with which she spoke, the acceptance in her voice was more devastating than any emotional outburst could have been. How old were you? 15. 15 years old. A child, essentially. Michael tried to imagine what it would be like to lose his mother at that age, in such a violent way, and felt an irrational anger against the world for allowing something like that to happen to someone so young. And your father? Luna's face immediately shut down. He had already died before. In prison, Michael frowned. In prison? He was convicted of forgery and bribery, she said, her voice progressively lower. 5 years in prison. He died of a heart attack in his 3rd year. Something in the way she said it made an alarm sound in Michael's mind. Forgery and bribery were crimes he had heard mentioned before, in contexts related to his mother's work as a lawyer. What was his name? Michael asked, though he wasn't sure why. Luna hesitated for a long moment, as if debating with herself whether she should answer. Charles, she finally said. Charles Miller. The name hit Michael like lightning. Charles Miller. He knew that name. He had read it in his mother's files years ago, when he was organizing her papers after her death. Charles Miller had been accused of forging documents to favor a rich client of his mother's, but claimed innocence. The case had been one of the last she took before retiring, and if Michael remembered correctly, his mother had been the prosecuting attorney who secured the conviction. The world seemed to stop around him. Luna was there in his house caring for his belongings, being kind and attentive, and he had just discovered that his mother had been responsible for destroying her family. Michael? Luna's voice brought him back to the present. She was looking at him with concern. Are you all right? You've gone pale. He wanted to say something, anything, but the words seemed to have gotten lost somewhere between his mind and his mouth. How could fate be so cruel? How was it possible that, of all the people in the world, Luna had ended up working precisely for him? I need some time, he finally managed to say. Michael left the office without looking back, leaving Luna alone with her questions. He went up to his room and locked the door, as if that could somehow block out the reality of what he had just discovered. He sat on the edge of the bed and buried his face in his hands. His mother, Dr. Helen Worthington, had been a brilliant and ruthless lawyer. She didn't lose cases, didn't make concessions, didn't let herself be swayed by sentimentality. It was precisely this professional coldness that had made her one of New York City's most respected attorneys. But it was also this same coldness that had destroyed families like Luna's. Michael vaguely remembered the Miller case. He remembered his mother commenting on a man who insisted on his innocence until the end, who cried in court, who begged for clemency. She had said at the time that it was pathetic to see an adult man demean himself that way, instead of accepting the consequences of his actions. Now he knew that man was Luna's father, and that perhaps, just perhaps, he really was innocent. The weight of this realization crushed him. For weeks, he had observed Luna, had felt something growing between them, had begun to open up in a way he hadn't in years, and now he discovered that all of it was built upon a foundation of pain and injustice. Michael remained locked in his room for the rest of the day, ignoring the soft knocks on the door and Luna's worried calls. When he finally came downstairs, it was already night and the house was silent. There was a tray with food in the kitchen and a note. "I heated the lasagna that was in the freezer. It's in the oven if you want to eat. L." Even worried about him, even after he had rushed off without explanation, she had made sure he had something to eat. The simple, natural kindness of the gesture only intensified his guilt. Michael didn't touch the food. Instead, he went to his office and spent the entire night poring over his mother's files, searching for any information about the Charles Miller case. What he found made him nauseous. There were notes in the margins of the documents, comments his mother had made during the case preparation. She knew. She knew that Charles Miller was very likely innocent, that he was being used as a scapegoat by his boss, a powerful man who had been her client for years. But she had chosen to protect the client, instead of seeking justice. There was even a letter Charles Miller had written from prison, begging her to review the case, saying he had a small daughter, and that his wife was suffering from severe depression. His mother had filed the letter without responding. Michael felt like vomiting. His mother, the woman he had idolized despite her flaws, had consciously destroyed an innocent family. And the consequences had been exactly what Charles had predicted in the letter. His wife had succumbed to depression and killed herself, leaving an orphaned teenage daughter alone in the world. When the sun rose, Michael had made a decision. He needed to tell Luna the truth. He didn't know how or when, but she deserved to know. And then she would probably leave, and he would have to live with the weight of yet another life destroyed by his family. It was with these somber thoughts that he went down to the kitchen the next morning. Luna was there, making coffee as always, but there was something different about her. A tension in her shoulders, a hesitation in her movements. "Good morning," she said without looking at him. "Good morning." Michael poured himself coffee and sat at the table. "Luna, we need to talk." She finally looked at him and he saw fear in her eyes. "About yesterday?" "About many things." Michael took a deep breath. "About your family. About my mother. About what happened between them." Luna was very quiet for a moment. Then slowly she sat down at the table across from him. "You knew," she said. "It wasn't a question." Michael shook his head. "Not until yesterday. When you said your father's name, I remembered. My mother was the lawyer who secured his conviction. And now?" Luna asked, her voice almost inaudible. "What happens now?" Michael looked at her, at that young woman who had lost everything because of his family, who had grown up alone and yet still maintained so much kindness and delicacy. Who was there in his kitchen, making coffee and caring for the house of the son of the woman who had destroyed her life? "Now I need to tell you the truth," he said. "About what really happened. About what my mother did." And then he began to tell. He told her about the files, about the notes, about the letter Charles had written from prison. He told her about how his mother had chosen to protect a corrupt client instead of seeking justice. He told her about how she probably knew Charles was innocent. Luna listened to everything in silence, tears silently streaming down her face. When Michael finished, they sat in silence for several minutes. "My father always said he was innocent," she finally said. "Until the last day he swore he hadn't done anything. I wanted to believe him, but everyone said he was lying, that it was easier to blame others than to accept responsibility." "He wasn't lying," Michael said softly. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry for everything." Luna got up from the table and walked to the window, turning her back to him. Michael could see her shoulders trembling with silent sobs. "Why?" she asked. "Why did your mother do that?" "Power," Michael said, the word coming out bitter from his mouth. "Money. She didn't want to lose an important client. To her, your father was just expendable." Luna turned to face him, and the pain in her eyes was so intense that Michael felt as if he had been stabbed. "And you?" she asked. "Am I expendable to you too?" The question hit him like a shot. Michael stood up and walked to her, stopping only when he was close enough to touch her face if he wished. "No," he said with an intensity that surprised him. "You are not expendable. You are the first person in years who makes me feel something other than emptiness." Luna looked at him for a long moment, studying his face as if searching for signs of deceit. "I don't know if I can stay here," she finally said. I don't know if I can look at you and not see her. Michael nodded, though each word was like a stab. I understand. I need time to think. As much time as you need. Luna walked past him towards the door, but stopped when she reached the threshold. Michael, she said without turning, thank you for telling me the truth. I know it must have been difficult. And then she left, leaving him alone in the kitchen with the weight of all the truths that had finally come to light. That night, Michael couldn't sleep. He walked through the empty house, feeling as if each room was a memorial to all the pain his family had caused. Luna's meticulous organization was everywhere. In the perfectly arranged cushions, the books organized by color, the surfaces gleaming with care. It was as if she had left pieces of herself scattered throughout the house, and now Michael was surrounded by reminders of what he might have lost forever. It was at 3 a.m. that he made the decision that would change everything. He went up to his room and started doing something he hadn't done in 20 years. He wrote a letter, not on the computer but by hand on real paper, with the pen that had belonged to his grandfather. He wrote about his mother, about her mistakes, and about how he had spent his entire life trying to be different, but failing. He wrote about the empire he had built on the pain of others, without even realizing it. He wrote about how meeting Luna had been like waking up from a 20-year nightmare. And then he wrote about what he was feeling, something he could barely admit to himself, let alone put on paper. He was falling in love with her. It wasn't just attraction or curiosity. It was something deeper, more frightening. It was the feeling that she had seen through all his defenses and still chosen to stay. It was the way she transformed his cold house into a home, just with her presence. It was how she made him want to be a better person. When he finished the letter, it was almost 5 a.m. Michael carefully folded it and left it on the kitchen table, next to the coffee machine. Then he went upstairs, showered, put on his best suit, and left the house. He had an empire to dismantle. When Luna came down to the kitchen the next morning, she found Michael's letter on the table. Her hands trembled as she recognized the firm, masculine handwriting on the envelope addressed to her. For a moment she considered not opening it. Part of her wanted to maintain the illusion that perhaps they could overcome the chasm that had opened between them. But she knew that running from the truth had never been an option in her life. She read each word twice, feeling as if the ground were shifting beneath her feet. Michael not only recognized his mother's mistakes, he was willing to undo everything he had inherited from her. He was willing to dismantle the empire built on injustices to try, somehow, to repair the irreparable. And at the end of the letter, written with a vulnerability she had never seen in him, was a confession that made her heart stop for an instant. I'm falling in love with you, Luna. I know I have no right, I know my family caused you too much pain, but I can't pretend I don't feel it. You made me remember that I am still human. Luna carefully folded the letter and pressed it against her chest, feeling warm tears stream down her face. How is it possible to love and hate someone at the same time? How is it possible to want to run away and stay simultaneously? For 3 days, she completely avoided Michael. She left the house before he woke up, and only returned when she saw the office lights off. She left his meals ready and small notes about practical matters, but nothing more. She needed space to process not only the revelation about the past, but also the feelings that were growing inside her like a storm. It was on Wednesday afternoon that the routine was broken by an unexpected visit. Luna was in the laundry room when she heard the doorbell. Through the window, she saw a black BMW parked in the driveway. An elegant woman stepped out of the car, tall blonde, wearing an expensive blazer that screamed sophistication. She moved with the confidence of someone accustomed to being admired and obeyed. Luna opened the door and was met with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. You must be Luna, the woman said, studying her up and down with a calculating gaze. I'm Claire Newman, Michael's partner in the clinics. Is he not here? No, ma'am. He's in his office. What a shame. Claire entered uninvited, her heels echoing on the marble floor. But perhaps it's better this way. We can talk woman to woman. Luna closed the door, feeling a shiver run down her spine. There was something predatory in the way Claire observed her, as if she were assessing prey. Talk about what? Claire walked to the living room and sat on the sofa as if she owned the house. About Michael, of course, and about you. I don't understand. Oh, darling, Claire laughed, a crystalline, cruel sound. Do you think you're the first household employee he's noticed? Do you think you're special? The words hit Luna like slaps, but she forced herself to maintain composure. I don't know what you're talking about. Michael has a pattern, Claire continued, clearly enjoying Luna's discomfort. Vulnerable women, usually working class. He likes to feel powerful, to be the savior. It makes him feel better about himself. Why are you telling me this? Claire stood up and walked to the window, contemplating the view as if she owned it. Because I care about Michael. We have history, you know. Long before you showed up here with your abandoned puppy eyes. Luna felt her face burn but said nothing. He'll get tired of you, Claire said without turning. It's always like that. He plays house for a few weeks, makes you feel important, and then, well, you know how it is. Men like Michael don't get serious with women like you. Women like me. Claire finally turned, and her smile was pure malice. Poor uneducated, without prospects. Do you really think someone in his position would publicly associate with a domestic worker? Every word was calculated to wound, and Luna felt as if she were being cut by sharp blades. But there was something in Claire's aggression that told her the woman was afraid. Secure people didn't need to attack like that. If you'll excuse me, Luna said with all the dignity she could muster, I have work to do. Of course you do. Claire picked up her purse and walked towards the door. Just one more thing, darling. Michael told me about your family situation, about what happened to your father. Luna froze. Michael had told Claire about her family. It must be very difficult, Claire continued, her voice dripping with false sympathy, to discover that the mother of the man you think you're loving was responsible for your parents' deaths. It must make you question if you're not being manipulated again. And with that, Claire left, leaving Luna alone with poison distilled in every word she had uttered. That night, when Michael arrived home, Luna had already made her decision. She couldn't tell him about the pregnancy. She couldn't destroy his life by forcing him to choose between her and the future he had already planned. And she also couldn't stay, watching him marry Claire while secretly carrying his child. She had to leave. But first, she would take just one pill of that sedative. Just one, to get through one last night in the house where she had been, for the first time in her life, truly happy. What Luna didn't know was that Claire had lied about many things that day. There was no engagement. There was no planned future with Michael. And the natural sedative in the vial was neither natural nor safe. It was something much, much worse. Luna took the pill that night with trembling hands, hoping the artificial peace would help her bear the weight of the decisions she had to make. The medicine had a bitter, metallic taste that clung to her throat for hours. She fell asleep thinking of Michael, imagining what it would be like to say goodbye for the last time. It was at 4 a.m. that the pains began. At first, they were just mild cramps which she attributed to stress, but soon they became more intense, accompanied by a burning sensation that radiated from her abdomen throughout her body. Luna got out of bed, dizzy, trying to reach the bathroom, but her legs gave out. She fell to the bedroom floor, gasping, feeling something warm and sticky trickling between her legs. When she looked down and saw the blood, she understood with terrible clarity what was happening. No, she whispered to the empty room. Please, no. But the pains only worsened, coming in stronger and stronger waves. Luna dragged herself to the phone and with trembling hands dialed the nearest hospital. Between sobs of pain, she managed to give the address and ask for an ambulance. They were the longest 20 minutes of her life. Lying on the cold floor, losing blood, she knew she was losing much more than that. She was losing the only piece of Michael she could have taken with her, the only proof that the love they had shared had been real. When the ambulance arrived, Michael was still asleep. The paramedics were discreet, following Luna's instructions not to wake him. She didn't want him to see her like this, broken, bloody, losing the child he didn't even know existed. At the hospital, the doctors confirmed what she already knew. Miscarriage, they said. These things happen, especially in the first trimester. But when they asked about medications she might have taken, about her medical history, Luna lied. She said she hadn't taken anything out of the ordinary, that there had been no warning signs. How could she explain about Claire, about the natural sedative, about the whole web of lies and manipulations? Who would believe her against a respected woman of New York City society? Luna spent 3 days in the hospital, recovering physically while dying inside. On the second day, she received flowers. They weren't from Michael. He didn't even know where she was. They were from Claire, with a card that simply read, "I hope you're feeling better. As we discussed, I believe you now understand what the best decision is for everyone." At that moment, Luna knew with absolute certainty that Claire had planned everything. The sedative was not natural, it was not safe. It had been calculated to do exactly what it had done. Remove the baby from the equation without leaving traces that could be linked back to her. And it had worked perfectly. When she was finally discharged, Luna returned to Michael's house only to pack her things. It was a Friday morning and he was in his office. She moved through the house like a ghost, gathering her few belongings, trying not to look at the places where they had been happy. She left a letter on the kitchen table. Not a full explanation, that would be dangerous for both of them, but a farewell. She wrote that she had realized their relationship was impossible, that the differences between their worlds were too great. She wrote that she was leaving for another city, that he shouldn't try to find her. And then, with her heart shattered into 1,000 pieces, Luna left Michael's life forever. Or so she thought. Michael arrived home that night and immediately knew something was wrong. The house was too silent, too empty. When he found the letter in the kitchen, he felt as if he had been shot in the chest. He read and reread the words, searching for clues, for signs that there was something more behind Luna's sudden decision. But the handwriting was hers, the words sounded like something she would say, and there was nothing to indicate coercion. Michael spent the entire night awake, walking through the house, touching the things she had organized, feeling her absence as a physical pain. For the first time in his adult life, he cried openly, not caring who might see or hear him. In the following days, he tried to find her. He called the domestic staffing agency, but they said Luna had cancelled her registration. He hired a private detective, but the investigation led nowhere. It was as if she had simply disappeared. That's when Claire appeared to console him. "I'm so sorry about what happened," she said, sitting beside him on the living room sofa. "But perhaps it's for the best. You two never would have had a real future together." "How do you know she left?" Michael asked, realizing for the first time that he hadn't told anyone about Luna's departure. Claire hesitated for a fraction of a second, just long enough for Michael to notice. "You told me," she said. "Yesterday on the phone, remember?" But Michael didn't remember. In fact, he was sure he hadn't spoken to Claire since the previous week. An alarm began to sound in his mind. "Claire," he said slowly, "did you talk to Luna when she was here?" "We spoke briefly once or twice." "Why? What did you talk about?" Claire shrugged, but Michael could see the tension in her shoulders. "Woman talk. Nothing important." "What woman talk?" "Michael, why these questions?" The girl left. "It's for the best. Now you can focus on important things, like expanding the business, like our partnership." "Our partnership?" Claire smiled, the same predatory smile Luna had seen. "Well, we've always worked well together. And now that you no longer have distractions, we can focus on what really matters." It was at that moment that Michael understood. Claire wasn't there to console him. She was there to make sure Luna had truly left, to reap the rewards of any manipulation she had carried out. "Get out of my house," he said, his voice low but charged with icy fury. "Michael, get out!" He stood up, his fists clenched. "And never come back. Consider our partnership terminated." Claire stood up as well, all pretense of concern vanishing from her face. "You'll regret this. Without me, your clinics will go bankrupt in 6 months." "Great," Michael said. "Perhaps that's exactly what I deserve." After Claire left, Michael spent days sifting through every conversation he had had with her. Every moment he had mentioned Luna, he began to piece together a puzzle that filled him with self-loathing. Claire had manipulated everything. She had used the information he had shared about Luna's family to attack her insecurities. She had planted doubts about his motives, about his character, about the future they could have together, and he had been foolish enough to give her all the ammunition she needed. Michael closed the clinics the following week. He simply arrived at the office and announced that all operations would be suspended indefinitely. He ignored Claire's shouts of protest, the legal threats, the desperate attempts of his other partners to make him change his mind. He no longer wanted anything connected to his mother's legacy. He no longer wanted to profit from the pain of others. He wanted to destroy everything she had built and start anew, even if it meant losing her forever. In the months that followed, Michael transformed into a man his mother wouldn't recognize. He sold the clinics to ethical medical groups that genuinely cared about patients. He used the money to create a legal aid fund for people who had been victims of judicial injustices. Like Luna's father, he worked day and night to clear Charles Miller's name, hiring the best lawyers, gathering evidence, pressuring authorities. It took 2 years, but he finally succeeded. Charles Miller was officially declared innocent post-mortem. And the true culprit, his boss who had been protected by Michael's mother, was finally brought to justice. Michael published an open letter in the country's main newspapers, taking responsibility for his family's mistakes and publicly asking forgiveness from all the families who had been harmed. The letter caused a scandal in New York City society, but he didn't care. Throughout all this time, he continued looking for Luna. Not to bring her back, he knew he had no right to after everything that had happened, but to tell her about her father's exoneration, to give her at least that. It was a different private detective who finally found her. She was living in Miami, working as an administrator for a small NGO that helped women victims of domestic violence. She had changed her surname to her mother's maiden name, started a completely new life. The detective said she seemed well, stronger, more confident. He said she had become one of the organization's leading voices, that the women she helped adored her. He said she smiled more, but that there was still a sadness in her eyes that never completely disappeared. Michael wanted to go to Miami immediately, but he forced himself to wait. First, he needed to finish his work of redemption. He needed to become someone worthy of being in her presence again. It took another 6 months for him to muster the courage to make the trip. Luna was leaving the NGO office on a sunny Thursday afternoon when she saw him. For a moment, she thought she was hallucinating. It was impossible for Michael Worthington to be there, leaning against a tree across the street, looking at her as if she were a ghost. But it was him. Thinner, with slightly longer hair, wearing jeans and a simple shirt instead of his expensive suits. But it was definitely him. Luna felt her legs give out. For 2 years, she had convinced herself that she had moved past Michael, that she had found peace away from him. But seeing him there, so real, so close, brought all those buried emotions back to the surface like an avalanche. Michael crossed the street slowly, as if approaching a frightened animal that might bolt at any moment. "Hi," he said when he was close enough to speak. "Michael?" Her voice came out as a whisper. "What are you doing here?" "I came to tell you about your father," he said. "Charles Miller was officially exonerated 3 months ago. All the newspapers published the news. The true culprit is in prison." Luna felt tears burning in her eyes. "After so many years, finally. How? I hired the best lawyers. We found new evidence. We pressured until someone confessed." Michael hesitated. "Your father was innocent, Luna. He always was. The whole world knows it now." She began to cry right there on the sidewalk, not caring who might be watching. All those nights awake wondering, all those years carrying the doubt. It was finally over. "Thank you," she managed to say between tears. "Thank you for giving me this." Michael desperately wanted to touch her, to console her, but he stayed where he was. "It was the least I could do." They stood there for a few minutes, she crying, he watching, both surrounded by the weight of everything left unsaid. "How did you find me?" Luna asked finally. "Private detective." "It took 2 years." Michael hesitated. "Luna, I need to ask you something. Why did you really leave?" "The letter you left." "There was something more, wasn't there?" Luna closed her eyes. For 2 years she had rehearsed this moment in her head. She had imagined what she would say if she ever saw him again. But now that he was there, the words seemed inadequate. "Claire," she said simply. The name hit Michael like a punch. "What did she do?" Luna told him everything. About the visits, about the lies regarding the engagement, about the insecurities Claire had exploited. She told him about the natural sedative and about waking up in a pool of blood. But she didn't tell him about the pregnancy. That secret she would take to her grave. When she finished, Michael was as pale as a ghost. "My God," he whispered. "My God, Luna, I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I never imagined she would be capable of—" "It wasn't your fault." "It was." His voice broke. "I told her about you, about your family. I gave her all the information she needed to hurt you. And then when you left, I didn't even suspect her. Luna looked at the man in front of her, this man she had loved more than life itself, whom she had lost because of lies and manipulations. He looked different. More human, less armored. The pain had broken him, but it had also made him more real. What happened to her? Luna asked. She lost everything. The clinics, her medical license, her reputation. When I shut down the business, I investigated all her operations. I found evidence of professional misconduct, unauthorized experimental drugs, fraudulent billing. She's facing criminal charges. And you? What will you do now? Michael gave a sad smile. I don't know. For the first time in my life, I don't have a plan. I just know that I wanted to find you. I wanted to ask for your forgiveness. I wanted you to know that your father was exonerated. They stood in silence for a moment. Luna studied his face, seeing the lines of fatigue around his eyes, the way he kept his shoulders hunched, as if carrying an invisible weight. Are you okay? She asked. Michael laughed, but it was a humorless sound. No, I haven't been okay for 2 years. Not since you left. He looked directly into her eyes. I love you, Luna. I still love you. I know I have no right. I know I caused you a lot of pain, but I needed you to know. Luna felt as if her heart was going to break again. Michael, you don't have to say anything, he said quickly. I just needed you to know, and to know that I dedicated every day of the last 2 years trying to become someone worthy of you. I don't know if I succeeded, but I tried. You were always worthy, she said softly. The problem was never that you weren't good enough. The problem was that other people didn't want us to be happy. Michael took a step towards her. And now, Claire is gone. My mother is gone. The past is resolved. It's just the two of us. Luna wanted to say yes. She wanted to throw herself into his arms and pretend that the last 2 years had been just a nightmare. But there was much he didn't know. Secrets she carried, scars that would never fully heal. I need time, she said, to process all of this, to understand what it means. Michael nodded, although she could see the pain in his eyes. How long? I don't know. Can I stay in the city for a few days? I won't bother you, I promise. I just want to be close in case you want to talk. Luna hesitated, then nodded. There's a hotel downtown. Boa Vista Palace. Thank you. She turned to leave, then stopped. Michael, what did you do with the house? I kept it exactly as you left it, he said. Even after 2 years, I didn't have the heart to change anything. The words hit Luna like a wave. He had preserved her memory, had kept alive a sanctuary to what they had shared. Why? Because it was the only thing left of you, he said simply. That night Luna couldn't sleep. She stayed on the balcony of her small apartment, looking at the stars, thinking of Michael a few miles away. Part of her wanted to run to the hotel and throw herself into his arms. Part of her wanted to run away again, to protect herself from the possibility of being hurt once more. But there was a third part, a part that had grown during her 2 years away from him, that wanted something different. It wanted the complete truth between them. It wanted total honesty, without secrets, without lies, without protections. The next morning she went to the hotel. Michael was having coffee in the restaurant when he saw her. He immediately stood up, knocking over his cup in the process. Luna, I need to tell you something, she said without preamble. Something I should have told you 2 years ago. They went to his room, a neutral space where they could talk without interruption. Luna sat on the edge of the bed, Michael in a chair facing her. I was pregnant, she said, the words rushing out before she lost her courage. When I left, I was pregnant with your child. Michael became completely still. What? The medicine Claire gave me. It wasn't a sedative. It was something to cause an abortion. I lost the baby the night I took it. Tears began to stream down her face. I woke up in the middle of the night with horrible pains, bleeding. So I lost our child, Michael. The revelation hit Michael like a high-speed train. He leaned forward, burying his head in his hands, trying to process the enormity of what he had just heard. My God, he whispered. My God, Luna, I'm so sorry. Why didn't you tell me? Because Claire told me you were engaged. Because I thought you didn't want me, that you were just playing with me. Because I didn't want to destroy your life by forcing you to choose. Michael lifted his head, his eyes red with tears. We were never engaged. There was never anything between me and Claire beyond work. She lied about everything. I know that now. But at the time you were alone, pregnant and terrified. Michael stood up and knelt in front of her. And I wasn't there to protect you. I wasn't there when you needed me most. Luna touched his face softly. You didn't know. I should have known. I should have realized something was wrong. I should have fought for you. He held her hands. Luna, forgive me. For not being strong enough, for not protecting you and our child. The word "our" broke Luna's last defenses. She leaned in and kissed him, pouring 2 years of longing and pain into that kiss. There's nothing to forgive, she whispered against his lips. We were both victims of Claire. We both lost things we can never recover. They held each other for a long time, crying for their losses, for the wasted time, for the child they would never know. It was a pain they would always carry, but that they could now share. And now? Michael finally asked. Now we start over, Luna said. Not where we left off, because we are different people now. But from scratch, getting to know each other again, building something new on the ruins of what we lost. Michael smiled for the first time in 2 years, a true smile, full of hope. I would like that very much. But this time, Luna said, her voice firm, no secrets. No lies, no protections. If we're going to do this, we're going to do it right. No secrets, Michael agreed. 3 years later, they married in a simple ceremony in Miami. There was no grand party, no New York City society, no pomp or circumstance. Just the two of them, a few people who truly cared about them, and the promise of a future built on truth and genuine love. Michael sold the cliffside mansion and moved to Miami. Together, they expanded the NGO where Luna worked, also creating a free legal aid center in memory of Charles Miller. They used the money from Michael's old clinics to build something that truly mattered, a place where marginalized people could find help and justice. The house they shared was small, simple, full of plants and books and music. It was the opposite of everything Michael had known, but it was the happiest place he had ever lived. One autumn evening, 5 years after they had reconnected, they were on the balcony watching the sunset when Luna said, "You know what I sometimes think?" "What?" That our first child brought us back to each other. That even if he didn't stay with us physically, he fulfilled his purpose. He brought us together. Michael pulled her closer. "Do you think he would have liked us?" "I'm sure," Luna said. "And I think he would be happy knowing that we finally found our way back to each other." They stayed there until the stars appeared, 2 survivors who had found peace in each other's arms. The past would always be a part of them. The losses, the pain, the mistakes that couldn't be undone. But the present was theirs, and the future was full of possibilities. Michael had finally shed everything, the pride, the anger, the walls that had protected him but also isolated him. And what remained was exactly what he had written in that notebook so many years ago. Her. And she was more than enough. She was everything.